Greetings, viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you for joining our conversation today on building climate resilient communities. Before we begin, I would like to highlight that this conversation is being recorded and will be posted later on our YouTube channel, CGC Nairobi. I would now like to hand over to our director, Dr. Murugi Jirango, to give the welcome statement. Welcome, Murugi.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Our distinguished guests, audience, please accept greetings from Nairobi. And on behalf of our colleagues from sister center, Colombia Global Center in Chile, it is a privilege to be with you today for the Building Climate Resilient Communities event. My name is Murugi Dirango, and I serve as the director of Colombia Global Center in Nairobi. It is indeed an honor to convene the discussion today in one of our thematic areas and also an area of global significance. The United Nations Environment Programme, which is based here in Nairobi, has recognized climate change as the single most significant threat confronting humanity today. This issue demands global attention to secure our present and, most importantly, the future of generations to come. We can no longer ignore the repercussions of rising temperatures. Globally, there are increasing reports of heightened extreme weather events such as floods, severe fires, droughts, and storms, alongside a growing prevalence of tropical diseases. Global responses to climate threats are gaining momentum with various initiatives aimed at mitigation and adaptation. But how are especially marginalized and vulnerable communities coping with these climate changes? This is going to be our discussion today. Today, we will gain insights from communities in Chile and Kenya on how local partnerships can enhance climate resilience and disaster preparedness. What makes sustainable farming essential to building resilient communities? Why is storytelling an impactful tool in driving climate action? And how can youth engagement shape climate solution and policy? What sets this discussion apart is the opportunity to learn from diverse experiences and leaders from various backgrounds, spanning academia to religion. As we begin this discussion, I invite you to listen closely and consider ways you might collaborate meaningfully with these leaders who are actively shaping the future of climate resilience in marginalized and vulnerable communities. I would like now to welcome Alex, who is going to moderate this conversation with our participants. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you very much, Dr. Drango. Good morning and good evening to everyone joining us from New York to Nairobi. Welcome to our webinar on building climate resilient communities. My name is Alex. I'm an intern with the Columbia Global Center in Nairobi and a master's student in the Global Thought program. With the crisis intensifying on a global scale, marginalized and vulnerable communities often bear the brunt of climate change. We are interested in exploring the ways people are addressing these challenges through collaborative, community-driven approaches, intersecting education, technology, advocacy, and policy. This webinar came together through a process of reflection, thinking deeply about whose voices we want to amplify and how to center the work of those driving change from the ground up. I thought about my time working with the Faith for Earth Youth Council at UNEP in Nairobi, which led us to connect with Rukia Ahmed and Joshua Kamani, who both work closely with youth and are leading community-driven climate resilience initiatives. We wanted to connect their work to what's happening within Colombia's network, which brought us to Antonia Samur, whose work in Chile stood out for the ways it engages local governments and communities in participatory climate adaptation planning. While we had covered youth movements, law, and policy, we realized something was still missing. Based on previous collaborations with Columbia Global Nairobi, we knew that Leah Adiampo would bring an essential perspective offering insight into the future of sustainable agriculture and community-based conservation. Today, we're excited to bring attention to projects in Chile and Kenya where innovative climate resilience efforts are taking root. From sustainable farming to youth-led advocacy, these initiatives are creating lasting impact at the local level. We're honored to welcome speakers from across sectors and continents to share their successes and challenges, from building local partnerships to engaging youth. Together, these voices reflect diversity, creativity, and commitment needed to build climate resilience in a rapidly changing world. And that's why we are so excited to have them with us today. Throughout this event, please feel free to leave questions. I think there's a Q&A section. We'll address them at the end. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Antonia Zamor. Antonia is a senior staff associate at the National Center for Disaster Preparedness, where she leads research and initiatives that support disaster planning, climate adaptation, and community resilience. Antonia currently manages a 2-year project in Chile that supports 3 local governments as they develop and implement local climate action plans in alignment with Chile's groundbreaking climate change framework law. This work focuses on integrating climate adaptation with disaster risk reduction, making sure local communities are at the center of planning and decision-making. She also brings a wealth of experience from leading a capacity building initiative for the childcare sector in Puerto Rico, teaching about community engagement and disaster management at the Columbia Climate School, and working across Latin America on sustainable development education and policy, like the Sustainable Development Solutions Network and the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, Antonia will be sharing insights from her work in Chile with a focus on how local governments are shaping community-driven responses to climate risk. She will offer a broader lens on what we mean by community resilience. Antonia, thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for having me in this panel. I'm very happy to be here. I hold Nairobi in Kenya very close to my heart. My mother lived there for a long time, and I visited her as well, and so I definitely feel a personal connection as well with the themes of this panel today. Thank you, Alex, again for the introduction. So as Alex mentioned, I have been working at the National Center for Disaster Preparedness for about 8 years now. We've worked in a lot of different projects related to community resilience, mostly focused on disaster and emergency preparedness. And although a lot of these projects are very multidisciplinary, my academic background is in economics, international development, and climate change policy. And so both my academic background and all of the different projects that I've had a chance to work on have allowed me to develop like a very specific understanding of community resilience, like from a very multidisciplinary perspective. And this is what we're basically trying to do in the project that we're implementing in Chile. We're trying to bring a multidisciplinary perspective to address some of these issues. And so just to start, given the talk today is about resilience, I just wanted to open up my part of this conversation with kind of bringing up this like very general definition of what resilience is according to UNDRR, which is the ability of a system or a community or a society which is exposed to hazards to resist, absorb, accommodate, adapt, transform, and recover from the effects of a hazard in a timely and efficient manner. And I think this can take we can look at this from a lot of different approaches, right? We can think about resilience from like a psychological perspective. We can think about resilience from infrastructure, from water management, urban planning, etc. But when we talk about resilient communities specifically, we're talking about communities that are organized, where social cohesion is at the forefront of their ability to adapt, to absorb, etc. These are resilient communities, that community that's informed about local climate change impacts, that's educated about managing current and future risks, a community that is prepared to respond to emergencies, where there are early warning systems, there's evacuation plans, emergency supplies, first responders are well equipped, where there's communication systems, etc. A resilient community is also one that supports its vulnerable population, and that makes plans to actually protect those that might be more at risk. A resilient community has access to technical and financial support to implement those measures, those actions for change. It's a community that also participates in local planning and decision making. And we know all of these carry a lot of challenges. So we're talking about like an ideal resilient community, but we know there's a lot of challenges associated with all of these. So a resilient community also is able to incorporate adaptation into development planning, can build and retrofit for resistant infrastructure, protect and restores natural ecosystems that buffer climate impacts, manages land and water sustainably, and a lot of other characteristics that really are up to every community. A resilient community doesn't look the same everywhere. It really depends on what the characteristics of that community and what they as a community see and envision as a resilient community themselves. And so strengthening resilience and adapting to climate change is a shared responsibility because it requires multidisciplinary approaches and data. We really do need researchers, academics, and people in government and the private sector to help develop and craft these approaches, to help develop the data, collect the data. We also really need to be engaged in communities meaningfully, and we know that there's also different challenges there. It requires resources, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the context of Chile. It requires partnerships, it requires effective risk communication, and most of all, it requires commitment, accountability, and coordination from all sectors of government. To me, this is like one of the like most important pieces of the puzzles that really need to be there. Even though we can drive climate action locally, individually, as the communities, like there's a lot we can do as individuals. How sustainable these practices are really depends on whether or not they can be institutionalized and that they can be scaled across the territory. And so this is specifically developing policy frameworks that actually support assigning resources, support that coordination, the partnerships, that communication, etc. And in Chile, there's been a really interesting environment that has been driven by the process of implementation of two really important laws that have driven kind of like a nationwide, really fast-paced move towards some of these things. So towards some of the coordination, towards the developing multidisciplinary approaches, towards engaging communities. And so the first one is we reformed our national disaster risk prevention and response system. And so we signed a new law in 2021, which now requires regional and municipal governments to develop disaster risk reduction plans and emergency plans. And so there's been a process for creating units within local governments that specifically look at studying and assessing risk and developing plans to actually address that risk, and developing emergency plans, which not all communities, not all local governments had before this law. And then the second one, the Climate Change Framework Law. In 2022, Chile signed into law this basically, it's a set of guidelines that establishes also requirements for every sector to develop mitigation and adaptation plans, and for every region and municipal government to also develop climate action plans that includes both adaptation and mitigation. And it requires that these plans are aligned with sector plans, with Chile's long-term climate change strategy, as well with our national adaptation and mitigation plans. And so this has created, as I said, the process of implementing this law has really ignited a very strong process of developing capacities at all levels of government to, one, understand data on climate change, understand impact, and then planning for it, right? Planning for like what we're going to do about decreasing emissions. Chile has committed to become carbon neutral by 2050. And at the same time, Chile has a lot of challenges related to adaptation. We have a lot of vulnerable population, and we're exposed to a lot of climate hazards. But there's definitely some gaps. And some of these gaps are limited general knowledge about climate change science and impact, including within governments. The government groups that actually need to be implementing the law. There's still a lot of there's still a lot of misinformation. There's obviously a lack of resources to carry out effective, first of all, participatory planning activities. Engaging communities and planning processes takes time, takes resources, takes expertise, and takes accountability. When you include communities in a planning process, you can't just include them to say that you included them. You need to make sure that what comes out of those engagement processes are actually included in plans. And so you need to also make sure that you have the capacity to include what the communities need in these plans and in budgets and the whole planning process. And then resources to actually implement adaptation measures at the local level is now in Chile one of the major challenges, because even though there's a law, the law doesn't really bring additional resources. It kind of tells the municipalities you need to first assess risk and identify adaptation and mitigation measures, and then you need to find resources. And so this is obviously worldwide, even at an international level, like one of our main challenges, right? Another one of the gaps that we've identified has been that there's also gaps in planning capacities. Climate change requires a very specific type of planning, which isn't really always there in governments. The first one being a long-term perspective in planning. Climate change forces us to look at long-term climate projections and trying to understand what the long-term climate is going to be, so I can take actions today and tomorrow in order to be prepared for that future climate. And we know in most countries, a lot of planning is really short-sighted, related to political cycles, related to what's going to get me to win a next election. And so we usually see planning processes that don't look over 4 years, right? And so climate change and this process is now forcing us to look over the long term. And sometimes that's really hard to do for government officials that are kind of like used to only thinking about like more about the politics of it all. So climate change forces us to kind of take out the politics of it all and just think about facts and data and really like what we need to do in order to adapt to a future climate where there's sure uncertainty around climate models and all of that, but that we need to make sure that we're communicating really clearly that there are impacts that are already happening and that they will just continue to happen. And then there's also a lack of guidelines on how to integrate adaptation with disaster risk reduction. Even with these two laws that are being implemented at the same time, there isn't a lot of guidance on like how to integrate your disaster risk reduction plans and your emergency plans into the planning for climate action. And so with this project, from those gaps and experience, we identified some opportunities. So all regional and municipal governments are required to carry out a planning process and have a climate action plan by June of this year. That is what the law says. And so literally every one of the 342 or 3 local governments in Chile is currently conducting a planning process to develop a climate action plan. And so to me, there is like huge opportunities there because you're asking local governments to integrate actions in climate change and impacts in the territory. You're asking the local governments to plan with the communities to increase awareness, increase ownership. You are asking the municipal governments to collectively identify risks and strengthen planning capacities and mainstreaming climate adaptation into other sectors and promoting local leadership. And so not all of these things will happen as a result of the law. And so there's definitely opportunities, and that's the opportunity that we identified with this project to contribute to trying to help these things actually happen with some municipalities. Because as I said, even though local authorities have provided guidance on how to carry out that process, and that guidance does include, hey, you need to include communities, you need to collectively identify risk and assess risk, etc. There's a lot of municipalities that, as I said, don't have the resources, don't have the capacities to do it. So through this project, Strengthening Capacities and Civic Participation from Climate Resilience Communities, we are working with 2 local institutions in Chile, along with also the Santiago Global Center. One is the Institute for Disaster Resilience, ITREND, and the Center for Climate and Resilience Research, which is based at the University of Chile. And through this 2-year project, we have been, for 1 year now, we've been supporting the development of these climate action plans with 3 municipalities in Chile. And then during the 2nd year of the project, after June, we'll be supporting the implementation of the project in different ways. So our main objectives are to provide technical support from a multidisciplinary team to these local governments, supporting civic participation processes, so making sure that engagement with the communities is effective, that there's accountability there, and that their views are actually included in the plans. And we're also working on the promotion of the integration of adaptation strategies and disaster risk reduction into other local and sectoral development plans, so mainstreaming climate change adaptation. Also, we're focused on strengthening local leadership. We, as a team, as a technical team, are by no means taking ownership of these plans. We're still really encouraging the leadership of the local government, but just like kind of providing support on the specific areas that they've identified that they need that specific support. And we obviously want to promote the lessons learned from this process. I think Chile right now is doing what every single country in the world is either also already doing or will need to do in the next few years. And so I think being able to learn from these processes from other communities, from other local governments that have done the work, I think is really important. And so our expected impact of this project is the institutionalization of inclusive, integrated, and sustainable adaptation plans, and obviously the reduction of climate risks through the coordinated implementation of these strategies. And so we want to make sure that not only these plans are like good and actually there, but we actually want to make sure that they're implemented and that they're viable. And so the work that we've been doing over the past year has been focused on some of these key areas. We've supported the local governments in developing key stakeholder maps. We've supported the collection of community perceptions of climate change through surveys and interviews. We've also done a lot of workshops on community risk mapping and community vulnerability assessments, so supporting their effective participatory planning. And we've also done a training for government staff on effective participatory planning. And so there we're also aiming to transfer capacities to the governments, not just do all the work ourselves. We're also in one of the municipalities, there's been a really interesting process of the unit of disaster risk reduction being integrated into the process of developing this climate action plan. And for us, that was one of our focus. And so we're really focused on making sure that the municipality finds the exact points of overlap between the climate action plan and all existing plans related to disaster risk reduction as well, and that they coordinate on the implementation of measures that might actually have overlap. And we're also working on helping municipalities identify sources of funding, developing monitoring and evaluation framework. That's also obviously super important for making sure that these plans and measures actually have the intended impact. And also we're working on the integration with our other planning tools and priorities. And now this is my last slide. Some of what we've learned so far. Obviously, this is not all. We're only halfway through a 2-year project. The main thing is listen. People already are seeing changes in the climate and people are already adapting. And so coming to communities with all like new ideas and things of what other people are doing, and like usually also technological ideas, communities might be resistant to that. And I think to a fair point. But then starting with promoting actions that communities are already doing and then including them in planning and listening to what they need is a really amazing way to start. In all of the interactions that we've had with communities in Chile, people are already doing things. Even if they didn't know that was climate adaptation, when farmers come in and say like, hey, we've been swapping some of our crops for more heat resistant crops, and they didn't even know, but this is what the rest of the region needs to be doing. And so we've been hearing them and really like taking note of all of the things that they're already doing, because these will be the most effective measures that any local government can promote, right? And ultimately there needs to be more, and people need to maybe be giving ideas of other actions that they can take, but ultimately starting with promoting what people are already doing is probably the best way to go. And then inform. There's still so many people with very little to no baseline knowledge of climate change and its impacts and adaptation. And not to say that people are ignorant, like people are seeing changes in the climate already, but understanding climate change also requires understanding a global process of the heating of the earth and the changes in climate patterns that has led to, and also the potential impacts in the future as well. We are definitely seeing some changes, but in the future, these will be more pronounced, and we might be exposed to additional hazards that maybe didn't used to occur in our areas. So informing, educating is really important. And there's also a lot of misinformation and denial still. People that just don't think climate change is an important thing to spend your time planning for. And so we have to be really careful with how we communicate these issues. We've had to change the way that even we have presented what climate change is and what the impacts are and everything like throughout the project. And then there's a lot of understudied impact in ecosystems. And there's obviously also still uncertainty around climate models and data. They aren't perfect. We still have to start somewhere. There's still we have to start somewhere. We have to start with the data that we have, and we have to identify where the gaps in data and studies are as well, so we can also move forward in understanding better what the future impacts will be. And also creating space for youth. Young people are so eager to participate and take action. But currently in Chile, I feel like because the implementations of these laws have kind of caught the governments a little bit off guard, and knowing that they have so much to do, that I don't think we have taken that opportunity yet of like including youth in these planning processes. And I think there's a huge opportunity there because youth are eager to do something about climate change. And so that's definitely something that in Chile we could be doing better. And then we need to understand that there's a learning curve across the whole ecosystem of actors involved in these issues, especially in the government, where there might be a little bit more resistance to doing more work, right? This climate change is basically forcing us to have to coordinate across different sectors with different actors and like find more resources. There's definitely a learning curve, and so we can't really expect things to happen overnight. But we just have to take one step at a time and one day at a time. And I think definitely the policy frameworks established in Chile have helped us move really quickly. But there will be a learning curve in implementing these plans effectively, and are probably the next generation of plans when they need to be updated in 8 years. There will be much better plans, right? Plans won't be perfect right now. But yeah, you have to start somewhere. And so that's where we are. So we are basically finishing the first year of the project, and our second year will be supporting the implementation of these plans. Yeah, and welcome, obviously, any comments, questions about the project and about the experience. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Okay, I think I'll leave maybe questions if we can yeah, we'll hold on to them for the end, for like after the panel. But thank you so much, Antonio, for sharing about the project, both for grounding us in a definition of what it means, what resilience means, and what it means in the context of community, but also just talking us through the successes and challenges in Chile. It made me feel a lot more hopeful about the power of policy and what we could do. So thank you very much for sharing. Now we're going to move on to hearing from our three panelists who will be speaking about their experiences on the front lines of climate action, reshaping what resilience looks like within the context of Kenya. First on our panel, we have Leah Ariambo, a passionate environmental steward and agribusiness professional committed to sustainable development and climate action. Leah was a Nairobi Climate Action Plan member, contributing her voice and insights towards shaping inclusive, youth-informed climate policies. In her capacity as a youth leader with the Hearts of Green organization, she's been at the forefront of grassroots environmental campaigns, mobilizing young people to adopt eco-friendly practices and driving community-based conservation initiatives. Leah blends her academic training with environmental values. She champions climate-smart farming techniques, soil health management, and eco-conscious infrastructure, such as solar-powered greenhouses and sustainable water use systems. Her work empowers farmers to adapt to climate change while restoring ecosystems and promoting food security. Next on our panel, we'll have Joshua Kamani, who is a passionate Kenyan legal scholar and environmental advocate. He holds a Bachelor of Law degree and currently serves as General Secretary of the Youth of the Orthodox Church of Kenya. He's also the head of legal research and one of the leading law firms in Nairobi. Joshua is deeply committed to youth empowerment, interfaith collaboration, and climate justice, and has led numerous initiatives on both the national and international levels. He is also presently employed by an organization dedicated to rescuing young women and girls from FGM resulting from climate-induced hardships. And finally, we'll have Rukia Ahmed, a passionate young climate justice advocate, a teacher, and the founder and executive director of the Green Northeastern Initiative, a grassroots youth-led organization driving climate change in Kenya's arid and semi-arid lands. Raised in Wajir, a region heavily affected by climate change, and starting her journey at just 16, Rukia has spent over 6 years championing environmental justice, climate adaptation, and community resilience. She leads transformative projects that blend ecological restoration with community resilience, engages actively in national dialogues on climate adaptation finance, and youth participation in nationally determined contributions. Inspired by Wangari's Madai's hummingbird story, Rukia continues to do her part in building a greener, more resilient future for vulnerable communities in northeastern Kenya. So thank you all for joining. We are going to begin with a question for each panelist about the ways that their work connects to the theme of climate resilient communities. So I'm going to start with Rukia. So I want to ask, to Rukia, you closely work with grassroots communities on climate adaptation. How do you define climate resilience in these contexts? And specifically, how does your storytelling approach help communities become resilient?
Thank you so much, Alex, for having me. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you're joining us from. And thank you for asking me that question. For me, climate resilience has been something I've been focusing for quite a while, especially connecting to the communities I work with, which are mostly affected by climate change. So from the grassroots context, how I define climate resilience is the ability of communities not only to adapt to climate change, but to also bounce back better. To look at not just the communities, but their livestock, their source of livelihood, especially the communities I'm dealing with, their source of livelihood is their livestock. These are pastoralist communities who mostly depend on livestock, and their wealth is their livestock. Their infrastructure mostly is anything that revolves around their livestock. And if their livelihood is secured and safe, and ability to withstand the climate shock they usually face, then we can say that community is resilient. We can also say community is resilient when their heritage is secure. I have seen within the community some of them losing their cultural values and cultural heritage, things that used to be something we value. Like I can't say I can go back and see where I was born and go back and see the beautiful memories, because that place is already destroyed by climate change. And someone might say they will compensate me, but basically I can't get back those cultural values and the ancestral lands. And some of most of these communities, they have value in Asian things and things they have grown up with. Some of them, most of the wealth they inherit. And basically, if these communities cannot actually depend on the things they love the most, then we cannot say they are really resilient. Another thing is, in terms of defining, is how ready are they for the how ready and prepared are they for the climate shocks that are to happen. We know most of these communities are vulnerable to climate change. Like my community, we um most of the time we actually have, sorry, is there background noise?
If there's a little bit background after, yeah, I wonder if.
Sorry, I can also hear this. I don't know where it's coming from.
Oh, that
Sorry about
sounds.
that. Okay, can I continue?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know. Basically, how prepared they are for the climate-related shocks. Like my community, most of the time, they are either affected by extreme droughts, heat waves, and once it rains, the communities have extreme flooding. And in terms of preparedness, a resilient community is always well equipped and prepared in terms of infrastructure. Most of the things that are affected are their infrastructure, the schools, the bridges. We see bridges carried away by floods, especially the recent floods we had in Kenya. So how prepared these communities are for such disasters or climate related shocks will define their resilience. Coming to the second part of the question, how does my storytelling approach help in building up climate resilient communities? Most of the approach we use is storytelling and cultural approaches, where we go and sit with the community and bring them together so that they are able to exchange how they have been able to survive this extreme climate change. We have seen the community, having 2 to 3 years of drought, but most of them, the cases of people dying are less. Maybe their livelihoods are lost, but these communities, in one way or another, they bounce back better. And maybe after some time, they are still surviving. So, and we look at the storytelling aspect, it brings out the indigenous survival mechanisms of these communities. And you get inspired listening to their story, the wisdom within this indigenous knowledge and local practices. And you find that there's something these communities are actually doing that, is interesting. For example, in my community, you will find on a very hot evening instead or afternoon, instead of going for cold water because maybe the cold water are not available within their locality, they will have a hot cup of tea. And it really works. So someone will ask, why do you have to go? Some people make joke out about it, but it really works. Like when I go home, I don't look for cold water. I just look for 1 or 2 cups of hot milk, camel milk tea. And it really, brings that community resilience. And we might see from different perspectives, but communities are surviving this struggle. You will actually see the wisdom in these practices. And there's a way these communities also prepare food. Like when you will find that maybe they use like milk as one of the main source of food and milk. Because mostly they keep animals and they are not agricultural communities, they don't practice agriculture. And you'll find that once they slaughter an animal, they use, drying and deep frying method of, to preserve this meat. And they came to know about traditional way of preserving meat like my community. That meat will go even for 3 to 4 months. Meaning one animal, maybe they see this animal is about to die, or maybe, just trying to prepare for the long droughts, they have that kind of preservation. And so many other, methods. And another aspect of storytelling is the moment these communities come and share their struggles and also their stories of hope and resilience, they get inspiration from each other. Someone is inspired and someone sees that I thought I was the one who was at a worse position. but I lost about 100, about 10 camels, and there's somebody else who lost 20. Somebody else lost someone. The moment they share the stories, they get inspiration and exchange, ideas on how to survive better. And it also brings back to them the aspect, but we can do better and we can maybe change our lifestyle. For example, finally, something that came within our community from our collection of our stories is that pastoralism itself is a way these communities survive. And we might think it's part of more of a culture, but it's an indigenous culture. Basically, so that they don't overgraze or they don't, finish the natural resources or exhaust the natural resources at once, but they move to another area for 2 to 3 months and let that nature, restore itself and come back to that area once it has restored. And the land is greener and better. So they don't overstay one area. It's a way to just promote, sustainable practices. And I came to know that this is a way they are building their resilience. And storytelling helps communities to be more resilient, to inspire action, and to exchange ideas. Thank you, and back to you.
Wonderful. I loved hearing you talk about that because also I think really connects with what Antonia started us with, this idea of just listening to communities, that there's already these actions being taken and have been taken for generations on how to adapt to climate. So just kind of listening and seeing what is to be done, what's done and what works. Hey, next I want to ask Leah. So you've led hydroponics training and tree planting initiatives in Homa Bay County. How do you see these projects impacting youth employment, food security, and the environment?
So thank you so much, Rukia. Thank you everyone for joining in this journey towards building climate resilient communities. So I'll go straight to echoing what Alex had said before in my introduction. I'm Leah, and I'm the CEO of Ladel Agritech, and I'll move forward to our vision. Our vision is we aim to really lead a global agricultural revolution by cultivating a future where farming thrives in harmony with nature. We envision a world where innovation, sustainable practices that nourish communities, empower farmers, and ensure food security for generations to come. We ensure to achieve this by adopting agri-technology like hydroponics, greenhouse farming, automated farming, and incorporating agroforestry in our farms. So I'll say this in my inspiration to doing this and becoming the leader of this company is because I grew up in Homa Bay County, and Homa Bay County in Kenya is in a semi-arid area. And if you go through the health statistics lately, that state that Homa Bay County ranks in second in the HIV infection, and it has come a very long way from the time when I was born, because I grew up seeing a lot of orphans left because of the high rates of infection from HIV/AIDS. So you find like one or two adults are the ones being left with a very huge community from extended families that they're supposed to take care of. So number one, this leads to food shortages, because the area being a semi-arid area, you find that we have long durations of drought and we have very short rains. So we only depend on the short rains to get our food, and that becomes maybe once or twice a year. So this food that is produced within these short rains is the one that is supposed to take care of us throughout the year, and not one or two mouths, many mouths. So that became a very huge problem. You find like so many orphans. Sometimes you don't even have people to take care of them. Sometimes the food that is there is so little, and it brought a calling, because my family was one of the families that had more than 20 people to take care of, and it was hard. As much as my parents were employed, it was so hard, because one, because of climate change, you can't produce enough food. Number two, the food, the mouths to feed are so many. And so it got me thinking, when I got to the age where right now I can do a change to it, because I swore to myself that I have to make that change. I got into the position where, from my biomedical engineering career, and the skills I got from agribusiness management, I'm in a position to make a change in that. So way into 2021, I made a transformative training on hydroponics technology. If you understand, hydroponics technology is farming without water, farming without soil, and it's farming without soil on limited water. So that number one was going to make sure that, as I am making sure that my climate change and I'm adapting to climate change effects in my area, I'm making sure that the major problem that was food insecurity or food shortages is really taken care of. So hydroponics technology really helps with that. It's a new technology, but it is really a faster way of making sure that food is provided to families all through the year. And as I mentioned, that I'm adopting greenhouse farming. Greenhouse farming, when I incorporate greenhouse farming with the hydroponics technology, it's like, let me say, like bingo, because it really helps in helping us produce food in long term. So it's a new technology that I had to incorporate trainings to the youth. The youths in my area know nothing about that. If you look at Homa Bay County, it's in the Lake region, so we are fishermen. So if you want to tell people that there is this new technology that is coming here and it's going to make food in your table like in a month's time, and we're used to short rains, it's something that is not really easy. So I had to move into that adaptation process. And number one, I had to use youth from high school, and this begins from the high school area, the high schools in the area, beginning from Form 1, where we have a training center. We put up a greenhouse in that area, and it acts as our training center. And at the same time, it also acts as where our food comes from, because we have we are producing plants like tomatoes in the greenhouses. We are producing capsicums. We're making sure that every other week, and this is a technology that makes sure that once we've started harvesting in like 2 months' time, we're going to be harvesting weekly very good quantities of this produce over the whole year, until like we feel like we really need to plant a new crop. So this has helped, number one, with these youth. It's creating awareness with our youth around the area. And you see what spreads most with the youth. So it's creating awareness. Number two, our women in the area, they're getting a place to come to work. So it's creating employment, especially one for the youths, and the number two is for the women that come to take produce to the market. They come to work. We have casual laborers. We have permanent employees on salaries. This involves women and men. And another thing is that we are not only doing this to produce food. We said we have to consider how are we adapting to the climate change. So in my work with Hearts of Green organization. Hearts of Greens helps me with the seedlings. So we are incorporating agroforestry. And this, we're doing it with the children. Remember, my major aim is sustainability. So I don't want to go around planting trees without knowing that how these plants are going to be taken care of. So we also have an initiative within the project that is called Adopt a Tree. This is where, when my name is Leah and I'm in grade 1, and Leah gives Leah a tree, and Leah names Leah the tree. The tree is now called Leah. So it's like I'm giving you a tree, and I'm making sure that you assign this tree your name, to feel that when Leah is taking a bath, my Leah tree at school or at home is also being watered. So I'm so sure that when I give this child this tree at grade 1, by the time she's getting to grade 9 and getting to high school, the plant is already 9 years old. And remember, every year I give this plant a new tree. So this makes sure that with the afforestation, these trees are going to take care of us in the future. And so far, if you look at the statistics from way time when I was a child and right now, the weather, the climate has really changed in the area. And sometimes now we can even get the rains within maybe twice a year, and it's actually really improving. So number one, we are taking care of all these and making sure that our community, there's nothing in all the aspects that hasn't been taken care of. So I'm really hopeful that this is going to be something that is going to be adopted through, because even live alone in Homa Bay County, because our company is based in Nairobi, you find that the statistics of 2021, they show you that 1.9 million Kenyans are at risk. Like, it's every day, it's an emergency to get food to them, because these are people that are going 3-4 days without food, and that's more than a million. Because if it's 2022 and in 2025 we're running almost to 4 million. And this technology that is called hydroponics, it's the one that you can get vertical gardens. So in our farm in Nairobi, we also advocate for vertical farms that are making sure that food production is really high and it's consistent, because when we have these, the vertical gardens, they are put anywhere. So it's like making farming possible where we thought farming is impossible, because on your concrete or in the buildings, in your balcony, you have maybe 16 heads of maybe lettuce or cabbages or skuma wiki. You're getting food. So we are also incorporating this with the normal modern ways of farming, in a way that, number one, you get food on your table. Number two, the climate change that will take years for us to take care of is not stopping us from adjusting and making sure that we just really don't depend on the rains to make sure that we have food. So I think that's okay, and I feel like I've well answered your question so far.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. I think you really showed us too how important it is to not just be working and supporting community efforts, but to be a part of those communities, because that seems like your experience really shows what were the needs in your community and what were the ways to best move this progress forward. And so it's very exciting to hear your work. I just wanted to say a disclaimer. I think I'll have us go into the allotted Q&A time with a few more questions for the panelists, and then I will open it up, just because I want to give everyone a chance to answer even a bit more about their projects I know prepared on. So next, I'm going to ask a question to Joshua. So your work sits at the intersection of faith and environmental activism. How do you see faith-based engagement contributing to building climate-resilient communities, especially through your work with OCYK and climate law?
Thank you, Alexandra. Today it's really a privilege to be the only gentleman speaking among these wonderful ladies, and indeed I must congratulate you and the entire team for putting up this wonderful engagement. And I'll shoot straight. I want to build up on what the two previous speakers have spoken about, the three previous speakers. And from the three speakers, one thing really stands out, that indeed we need to put whatever we are saying into action. And for us here, faith engagement is not just a general concept that we speak about. It is actually a lived reality, because we look at statistics to guide us. Currently, as we speak, 85.5% of Kenyans in one way or another are affiliated to a religion. So that says a lot about the country, that in one way or another, the faith they subscribe to imposes some sort of ideals on the kind of thinking they have. And actually, that is what we do. We tap into the belief and we convert the belief into some bold action. So through the Orthodox Church here in Kenya, and I also have had the privilege of working with other organizations like the National Council of Churches in Kenya, as well as All African Conference of Churches, and my general practice in environmental activism and climate law, I have seen first instance and firsthand how really faith can transform communities and build resilient communities like we have seen. So personally, I've had a very, very bad experience. We have had communities where people were wiped out. Floods wiped out entire communities. More than 100 people died. Faithfuls of the church died. We have seen people dying out of this thing. We have seen poverty pushing girls and small children into harmful practices like FGM and early marriage. And all these are climate-induced in one way or another. They are really not environmental issues, so as to say. They are human issues, and it is a real human crisis. And this is where actually now faith comes in the picture. So our faith really teaches us stewardship. That is what I would say. Stewardship and generally compassion and the general aspect of justice. And at our youth movement, OSIAC, we have put these values into work. Like I've said, we are tapping into this kind of action and converting it and making sure that we tap into the belief and make sure that it is bold action. So what we have done, like I can tell you, we have been able to plant more than 10,000 years in the last 1.5 years. You can imagine. And the idea is not just to green the earth. The idea is to protect livelihoods of people like we have had, and also to preserve the future of the coming generations by what we say intergenerational equity. We have tried to continue having sessions like just last week. We're able to start the green parishes in the country where we have churches that are adopting trees. Like I have had one of the previous speakers speak about the Adopt a Tree program. Interestingly, we have also been carrying out the program for the last 1 year. And now this last week we started the Green Parishes program, which means that parishes and the churches are adopting such kind of programs. So that is very, very good. Again, 3, we not only encourage our church leaders to preach on the pulpits, but at the same time we tell them, when you preach on the pulpit, make sure that at the same time you create a space where people can have a place to express themselves, because some of these things are already happening. And we just need to tune the communities into the kind of work that is impactful and the kind of work that changes lives every day. So faith communities indeed are really uniquely positioned because we are the ones who have the grassroots movements through the faith communities. Like I can tell you literally, in Kenya, it is a shock that in places where there is no school, there is a church. In places where there is no hospital, there is a church. So that speaks a lot about the kind of communities we have. So when we tap into these kind of beliefs and these kind of faith communities, we can therefore be able to transform our communities in a very, very large way. So finally, to give the work that we've been doing in the policy space, we have been trying every day to advocate for laws that protect our environment. We have tried to attend many engagements and prioritize the vulnerable people in our communities. But I must tell you, and I must be honest on this, our goal in the youth movement has been moving from policy to practice. And I can tell you honestly, we have so many policies. Here in Kenya, there are more than 100 laws, so many laws, but we draw the gap when it comes to implementation of the laws. That is a big challenge. And so ourselves, we have said, no, we don't want to have boardroom conversations. We want to move now into the practice space. We move from policy to practice. So that is what I would say has been really standing out in the work we have been doing. Transitioning from policy to practice has really helped us build resilient communities. And really not enough words can be able to explain the kind of actions I have seen. I would say that every tree we plant, every girl or child we protect, every policy we shape, that is faith at work. Because faith is what you believe in. Faith is what I believe in as Joshua. And this is changing our communities at a time. It is changing the world at a time. And I believe through our concerted efforts, we are going to have a truly transformed community. Thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you so much. That was very informative. I love the way that you connected it to what the previous speakers had said and kind of rounded together. I think for the best way to move forward, I think I'm gonna, for the panelists, they'll be kind of combining your last 2 questions. And the general question I'll be asking is both what are some challenges you face with engaging your communities in the work that you do, and what do we see when we look forward to the future? How do you envision that future? And so start with Rukia. So my question for Rukia is, how have you built this long-term trust and involvement, trust and long-term involvement in your community? And what do you see as the strength of youth leadership when we're looking forward?
Thank you so much once again. We have seen a lot of assistance from the community and especially working with the grassroots communities. Maybe just to highlight before I go to how we actually build the trust and maybe getting commitment from the community, just to highlight some of the context is we have seen communities being skeptical to some of the projects. Basically because maybe before people came and promised them a lot of change and people usually maybe somehow doing not sustainable projects and most of the time communities, depending on their context. Basically most of these communities, some of them do not have even 2 meals a day. So it has been one of the main challenges trying to call this community for a forum when all they're thinking about is how to get the next meal. And the moment maybe I think the previous people, how they've been involving the community is one of the challenges actually facing is most of the community promise cash relief, donations. Most of the time, if people call for them, they associate with material things and not knowledge, not empowerment, and real empowerment. And that is something with my organization we've been trying to go around. So it has been a big challenge when it comes to trying to reach to this community, trying to educate them. You'll find that people don't even know what climate change is. But all they know is when they hear flood, they know that people will come with food, who will come with clothes, and who will come with cash relief. And this has been culture which has been passed to these communities for the longest. And when for us as young people, like the oldest in our organization is about 25, and most of the time they see us as jokers, and it has been difficult. So we started with targeting educational institutions because starting from maybe just the general community, education is the closest way you can reach to any community. We saw that we can target the young generation, the school-going children, who already their mind is not that, poisoned and they are not much connected with what is happening. So once we educate this, we use them as a tool of empowerment to the community. So it was a program we are calling it the whole societal approach. We start from school, the children, to the teachers, now connect to the parents, and take to the community leaders. And another approach we have used to build trust within the community is the faith community, like the faith leaders. And we try to go to a faith event and try to now bring a little aspect of what we are doing, not as calling for a whole forum. And with time, it was easier now to reach to more youth. And when it comes to the youth, what we have used is that we try to look at what activities do the youth like the most. There's a program we were doing, and I think I'll also connect to the youth leadership question you asked to set on time. As we look at for the young people, especially from our communities, we saw that when we call for a meeting for the young people, maybe empowerment program, and just to have a consultation with them, they rarely turn up. But what we looked at is we looked at things like sport. Most of the youth from our community are into sport like football. So there's a program we did called Football for Climate, whereby we organize matches. We're doing the youth group who already have very active, very vibrant, sport activities, especially football clubs. And we use their youth leaders to, help them where we can and just use like branded t-shirts and bring the little they can. But within that forum, we are given some time to talk to them about climate and how to empower them and how to engage them in community activities. And that is the moment we have seen a big change within our community, and youth are more interested in our activities because they are not having that mindset that these people are coming to waste your time, but at least we are connecting to them, to the things that matter to them. But with time, we want to now make it more diverse programs and see other like talent and, talent exchange programs and how we can empower the young people. And for us, we believe that as a youth-led organization, tapping into the youth leadership and the youth in the grassroots, they have very strong position within the grassroots. And the communities listen to them because these young people have been with them and they have seen them grow and they have seen what they are undergoing and the change they are able to bring rather than just listening from a foreigner. And another aspect we've also used is we don't come and just speak science to them. We localize climate change and we don't even define climate change, but we use local examples. Like, for example, we say, we ask open questions like, how is the water, accessibility within your community for the last 10 to 5 years? And people will come and tell us, like 10 years ago, we used to have enough water in our boreholes, but nowadays we have to walk miles to get water. And we tell them, do you know why? This is what is happening, and this is how climate change is affecting you. You have seen the flood that is happening. You have seen how much the temperatures are rising. And compare that to the last 10, 20 that years when we come to the different generations, like the old people like 70 to 80, asking questions back to, centuries and, back to decades. And they're able to answer this question. And with that, we were able to build trust. And finally, another important aspect in building the trust of communities is making them on the project. We have seen communities where some people come and bring solutions to them without even knowing what problem this community face. I can't go to Wajir County or Garissa or any part of Kenya and say, listen to me, you're having an issue of fraud or you're having an issue of food, so I'm going to bring food for you. Or you're having an issue of water accessibility, I'm going to construct boreholes for you so that you don't have to go to the river. No, we have to sit down with the community and we assume we don't know any of the challenges they are going through. Listen to them and for them to suggest the solution. So once they own the solutions and they are the solution providers and they are people who are actually giving solutions to these problems, then we tell them, do you agree this is the project you want to do? Maybe we had a project to do restoration, but then we see that a school has an issue of water. Now we shift our focus and see how can we make sure that this school has access to water before we restore it? And now we can call for the relevant authorities and these communities are able to actually feel part of this solution and they actually have a lot to offer. So that is one way, so many ways we are able to build their trust and among many other ways. I think because of time, I'll stop here and thank you.
Thank you so much. I heard some really amazing points of what you're saying. Particularly, don't assume, speak of communities. I love this idea of meeting kids where they're at, not just, if they're like football, if they like sports, meeting them with that instead of trying to have them engage in something they're just not going to engage in as much. And also to localize your examples and to not just maybe say climate change or talk about these like bigger global issues, but really make it local specific. So thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to Leah. I want to ask, what are barriers that you faced? You touched on this a little bit in the last question, but maybe some barriers you faced in getting youth and farmers to adopt these practices, thinking about your greenhouse initiative. And how do you see this? These are kind of big questions. So whatever you feel guided by, how do you see Kenya positioning itself maybe in the global climate efforts, particularly when it comes to agriculture?
Thank you once more, Alex. So I will start with the main challenge is adaptation. It's the slow adaptation to the climate smart agriculture. One with the youth and two with the farmers. One with the youth is because it's something new and so many people, and it's not in so many agricultural courses in the campus or even in the high school. It's not part of agriculture. They just learn more of the traditional agriculture. So once they're like they get to the age where now you're introducing this to them, it's not something like they really actually adopt to because it's news to them. And for the farmers, it's something like it's enticing because number one, it has very huge returns that will ensure sustainability, and number one, increase in the profits that the farmers are getting. So their main barrier towards adopting this is because they feel like it's expensive. Because hydroponics technology combined with greenhouse farming, it's not a one-time. It's not money that you want to get into one time, but getting them into the advantages of this and the long-time projection of what this can get them makes them get into adopting it slowly. So what we used to get them to that is targeting. Our business model is um put in a way that for the farmers we are targeting retirees, we are targeting politicians, we are targeting businessmen that want to get a diverse revenue stream into agriculture. So if you look at this, these are people that at least they have the money to do that. And once the reason why we're getting these people to get into this agriculture, because there are people that will adopt it faster. One, because they have the money. The money is not a problem for them. And having them invest in this helps our youths because as I said before, we are using high schoolers and we are using the college students to get into agriculture. because once the method we have used is making it employment focused. Because you see, youth, as Rukia has said, most of the time they need enticement. And if this youth is doing agriculture in high school, especially if they start doing this in Form 1, by the time he's getting into Form 4, it's something he's already known. He's done it. Because in whatever centers that we have, in Homa Bay County, in Siaya County, in Nairobi County, we have demo farms, and not demo farms, these are farms that are in use. So we identify one farmer, a farmer that agrees to put up this greenhouse, and we use the farm for training sessions. The youths around the area are involved in this as young as they can, whatever age they want to get involved in. This is somebody that gets this hands-on practice. And once one is done, we look for the passionate ones and the ones that got these skills so far. So you find that these are the people we use in on the farms of our clients. So most of them in 20 out of 50 trainees, especially the youth, we get that all over 20 get employed in the farms. And this is one that spreads around. So every other youth that gets involved in our farms, whether it's through voluntary or maybe they're paid for the training, all of them know that at the end of the day, they're going to get employment. And employment doesn't really mean that they're going to be working on hard labor on other farms. Others are going to be agronomists. Others are going to be agroecologists. So you see, at the end of the day, with end results attached to it, most of them get into this platform. And so far, in the last like 20 years, the last like 3-4 years, because we began this project in 2021. So right now we are like 4 years into, and we have like a very high tonnage, especially because of the enticing results ended to it, and also the ones that cannot get into the training programs because of lack of finances to do that. We're also creating a commission-based enticement whereby when you bring a client on board, if you know somebody, a retiree who wants to get involvement in this, or a farmer who wants to upgrade their yields and get into greenhouse farming, once you bring this person on board, there is like a commission percentage that you get as the connector, who has brought this person on board. So you feel like ours is so much result motivational, and it brings a higher tonnage. Another thing that we do is we get grants through crowdfunding. We are open to partnership. And this helps us in getting through the projects that we really have. It gets us like help these projects get done with ease and faster, instead of us like getting to the savings and doing it long term. We want to like really do it in so as fast as we can, because it's something we are treating with an emergency. And on to the second question, like how is Kenya being positioned to the global climate action plan? As I look at the youth, especially the youth that I get involved with, they're so risk averse. Like they really want to get into this. One is because it's something they have seen work. Because I told you, like in every other way we do, like we have examples on the demo farms. It's something they have interacted with. So most of them are really willing to do this, and maybe most of them are just they just don't have the finances to go through the whole plan. But so many of them are really willing to do this. And number two, we have social media. If you have if you check our social media platforms, you'll get me as your farm queen. Most of the I do awareness, and I get so many youths getting onto the platform, and they really want to do this. So number one, with the youths, we can actually really revolutionize this and make it go faster. And number two, so many Kenyan corporates are really getting in there. Most of their CSRs are like mostly involved into climate action. So you felt like so many people are getting into like, how can we do this? And another thing, like what our president did was um, having like a marathon on getting 5 billion trees, I think by 2030. And it's something like it runs down to every government attached office really wants to get this done. So we felt like Kenya so far, I think it's fast moving through this, excluding the challenges that are getting us, and maybe the obstacles that are preventing us from achieving it faster. I think Kenya is in a very good position towards achieving this global climate action plan. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to highlight some points that you mentioned, just really this not just kind of engaging your community, but also making sure that you are providing back to them. So whether that's providing employment or just being open to partnerships is a really interesting point that you brought up, and very exciting about your work. So finally, I think I'll ask my last question to Joshua, which is, what obstacles have you faced in securing support for environmental programs? And what are some strategies that you recommend regarding engaging both faith actors, but also youth and climate resilience?
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for that very profound question. I'll try to be brief because owing to the time constraints we have. When I reflect on the work that we have done for quite some time now, indeed I would say the challenges are numerous, and there is a lot of opportunities that we can really offer. And one of the key challenges we have faced is really human vulnerability has increased. In Kenya, much of Africa, currently as we speak, the issues of drought are not ending. Floods are not ending. Weather patterns are so erratic. Livelihoods have been devastated. Every day, people are being displaced. Poverty has deepened. Like, the levels of poverty are off the roofs. So, and these events are not really isolated by themselves. They bring other crises along with them. Issues of food insecurity keep on increasing. We were again last week doing a very good research that pointed out actually even cases of gender-based violence are increasing with these kind of challenges. And really, I must say that these are affecting young people and marginalized community in a very, very big way. So another challenge that we have seen is the limited resources that we have. For example, faith-based organizations, we have a very rich vision and community trust, but it is just the vision that is rich. You can imagine we operate on a very minimal funding. There is really low technical support that we have for the programs and activities that we do. Rarely do we get the technical support that we would really want to have. Again, there is inadequate access to climate adaptation technologies. I am very excited and happy to hear my fellow panelists speaking about different technologies, but really this has not gone to the grassroots levels, because I have experience of going to most parts of the country through the youth movement, and I can tell you that really most places don't have this kind of technology. Again, the third challenge we have faced is perception. So faith-based communities are being sidelined in one way or another because we are viewed as faith-based actors, so to say, or we are seen as rather spiritual and really not strategic for the climate conversations. People see you are going to bring your spiritual things into this conversation, and here we need strategy and such. So that sidelining has really caused a lot of damage, because it is underestimating the capacity of faith institutions to mobilize communities, to educate communities, and lead sustainable changes at a scale. So that has been really something that has been affecting us. And finally, I would say systemic challenges are really there, because policy is there, and despite the existing policy, there are still policy gaps at it. I told you, we want to move from policy to practice. There is no enforcement. There is weak or no implementation of the policies that we have. Sometimes we have a lot of political interest from the political actors, which is really so sad, because if we want to have just transition and we want to have climate resilient communities, how can we be able to achieve that with all these things coming in front of, prioritizing the interests of the community? So that is really disturbing. And when you asked me about, sort of what I see for the future and the kind of opportunities that I would say that we have, is that, one, we must say and we must acknowledge that we have an incredible asset in our people and in our faith networks. By virtue that our people, more than 85% of citizens in the country affiliate with the faith tradition. This means that we really have access to a deeply rooted and trusted and organized social system. And this is a real infrastructure that can be used to deliver real change from the grassroots level all the way to the national level. Because this is already a whole established institution. If we can build on it, and because the infrastructure is already there, then it means we can be able to really cause real change. Again, too, the young people are rising. The youth are rising. Youth feel empowered. Faith-driven youth are now leading climate action. From my organization, youth are doing community organizing. People are mobilizing communities. We have a lot of work on digital advocacy. Interfaith dialogues are happening every now and then. Our generation has refused to wait. Alexandra, we are not going to wait anymore. We are going to shape the future. We are tired of waiting. We are going to shape the future through the small things that we can be able to do. So that is a win, and I would say that's a real opportunity that I've been very excited about. Again, 3, we must recognize that there has been a growing recognition of the role of faith actors in policy spaces. And at least by the grace of God, institutions are beginning to see the value-based approaches that are essential when you need to achieve a just and inclusive sustainable development. Because this is going to help us open doors for sustainable partnerships which are strong, at least sustainable funding for the kind of work that is happening, and influence not only on government platforms, but also in international and national platforms. And that is really going to help amplify the work that is happening. And 4th and finally, we stand at a place where the global solidarity is increasing. And that is why I must congratulate you, Alexandra, and the Nairobi Global Center for the kind of work that you are doing. You are really a living example of what I am about to say right now, that global solidarity is increasing. And this is not only happening on climate financing, but it is happening on youth engagement and interfaith collaboration on such kind of crucial issues. Therefore, we must try and leverage this to try and build stronger coalitions. Alexandra and team, help us amplify voices here locally. Help us amplify the African voices, not only at a national and local stage, but at the international arenas. Help us ensure that our communities are not left behind. Yes, we have faced many challenges, I would say, because I've told you, we have seen people die, we have seen many displaced, we have seen people suffering and afflicted. But one thing I can tell you is that we are not victims. We have refused to be called victims. We are visionaries. We are seeing that indeed there is a future, and we are very, very hopeful and positive about it. And our faith teaches us that hope is not passive. It is active. Hope builds, hope leads. And as we look to the future, we must move forward with courage and collaboration and conviction among ourselves. I believe personally we have everything that we need to make this happen. We have our faith, we have our people, and we have the purpose that we need to really transform this moment into a whole movement. So thank you, Alexandra and the team. It was really an honor to speak among very, very good panelists, and thank you for moderating the discussion very well. And I believe that together we can be part of this global change that we need. So thank you, and may God bless us all.
Thank you so much. That was a very wonderful finish and end to this panel and to this conversation. I want to highlight some points that I heard from you, which is very much maybe this need to even be sharing technology between communities. It sounds like we have some really wonderful innovations happening within even Kenya alone, and that can be shared so that we can see it in more spaces. That is a huge need. This potential of faith, both as somewhere that has this institution and the infrastructure to drive movement, and then also engaging the youth that are hopeful and that are driven and are passionate, especially we're seeing in Kenya with youth movements in this past year or two, that there's a lot of potential. And then I love that this point you ended on of global solidarity and how do we amplify voices and how do we find what's happening around the world, what are the similarities we're seeing in Chile, we're seeing in Kenya, we're seeing the work that we can all do in this. I want to open up to, if we have questions, I know I did not leave very much time for it. No, I see someone had a hand raised, but I'm not sure how to call people. I see the question about the PowerPoint. I think Antonia has access to it. But at the end of this, we will be posting the recording. And so if there's a need to have, you can at least have the recording with the slides on it. But if there's anyone who has questions, please leave it in the chat and the Q&A, and I can open it up. Okay, oh, I got that. Got answered. Okay, she will share. Okay. Well, if there are no questions, because I think our panelists did such a wonderful job explaining all of their work and what it means to look forward, I want to conclude this webinar just first. Oh, okay. Thank you all so much for making the time. We have our panelists from all over the world right now and with very busy schedules and lives beyond just speaking. And so really appreciate it. And thank you all for attending and for listening to this work. You'll have the recording, so please feel free to share with anyone who you think would be interested and needs to hear these stories and hear the work that is being done. I hope that we can all really learn from this work and find ways to apply it to our own communities, regardless of where we are. And so I want to thank you all very much. I feel very empowered. I feel very ready for change to happen right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that concludes our Building Climate Resilient Communities. Wonderful.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you all very